Hi, I'm Katie, and this is my tutorial on beaded looped edging for your cross stitch, as seen here in one of my Christmas finishes with a beautiful red 2mm crystal round edging. In this tutorial, I will be covering the actual mechanics of how to do the beaded looped edging, but also the details of bead choice, your different options, the different looks you can get, and all sources will be listed in the description for the episode. I'd like to start today by noting that I myself did not come up with this technique. I first saw it from Joy of It's Finally Finished finish of Brenda and the Serial Starter here on FlossTube, at Brenda Sampler Stitcher on Instagram's finish of Hats Annie Morris, which featured a looped edging of round amethyst gemstone beads. I believe they were a 3mm round. So this 2mm round, as you can see, is much more delicate and gives a different look, partly because of the nature of the beads themselves. Faceted rounds, such as the crystal beads I use, are not truly spherical. They have a flat spot on either side of the hole. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this here. And that keeps the beads from sitting together in the same way that a truly spherical bead, such as the ones used on Annie Morris, would. So if you want the more curved, looped edging as seen in Annie Morris, as opposed to the more triangular way the crystal beads locked together, you would be looking to use a truly round bead in any material. But here I have some 3mm round garnet gemstone beads purchased from Fire Mountain Gems, which are a great source for gemstone beads. Gemstone beads can also be found in faceted forms, such as this 2mm. I believe that these are peach moonstone beads. They're really beautiful. This would make for a great edging, and these were also purchased from Fire Mountain Gems. On size, I recommend staying between 2 and 3mm. I have tested a 4mm looped edging and didn't particularly care for the look. I thought it was very bulky and lacked the kind of charm and delicateness of either my 2mm versions or the likely 3mm on Annie Morris. That did also use a crystal bead, so a fully spherical bead might look a little better, but my recommendation is to stay between 2 and 3mm. 2mm if you want this very delicate look, 3mm if you'd like a little bolder look, closer to Brenda's finish. So today I will be using the 2mm crystal rounds. And to note, if you are new to beading and the distinction between crystal, gemstone, seed bead, etc. is confusing, I highly recommend going and watching the beginning of my tutorial on beaded spiral rope stitch, which is essentially beading 101, and I explain the different types of beads, sizes, shapes, etc. So today, 2mm crystal round in a color called Crystal Golden Shadow, which will go beautifully with my finish of Brenda Gervais Season from the Heart Spring. And to stitch it, I will be using silk sewing thread. My preference is a wonderful Japanese brand called Kinkame, which you can purchase from Britex Fabrics. This is 50 weight and it is in color 93, which I find to be a wonderful color that really disappears into neutral linens. This is Legacy Linen Brewer's Malt. I also use it for Fuller's Teazel, another favorite kind of tanny neutral linen. So that's a great color if you are confused by the wide selection of Kinkame available on Britex's website. And then I am using it with a number 10 milliner's needle, which I find is fine enough to easily go sorry, I'm trying to position this so the camera can focus, to easily go through the eye of the bead, but sharp and flexible enough to easily manipulate it around the edge of your stitched finish. If you are using a gemstone bead, you may need to switch to a finer beading needle between sizes 12 to 15, as gemstone beads often have very, very fine holes. This does depend on the specific bead. Not all of them do have incredibly fine holes. And I'm using silk sewing thread because I am using a very lightweight 2mm crystal. If I were going to use a gemstone bead, a 3mm or 4mm crystal round, I would be using nylon beading thread. So that can either be Nymo size 0 or 00, or Ceylon A or AA. I will put sources in the description, as I said, but onto the specifics of how you actually undertake beaded looped edging. I have threaded my number 10 milliner's needle with my silk sewing thread, and I'm going to start at one of the corners. So I'm going to start by burying my thread end. So I'm going to try and pull this through one of the stitches to bury the knot. It would help if I could actually get my needle in. And I want to come up right at this corner. Actually, maybe just a little before the corner. Okay, that's good. I'm gonna pull through and then just try and pop that knot into the seam without breaking the thread. Be gentle here. You need some force to pull it through so it doesn't show, but if you break your thread, you have to start over. So I've started my thread, and then I am going to thread 3 rounds onto my needle. Each picot is always 3 rounds, and your formula is 3 beads per whatever your spacing is. So, oh gosh, I actually didn't double check what my spacing is. Oh yes, here I used a 3/8 of an inch distance. For a larger bead than this, you would want to space your loops further apart. I haven't experimented with this yet, so you'll really have to see what works for you. And also the 3/8 distance is what I like. You may like your loops spaced more closely together or a little further apart, depending on your desired look. So what I do to get even spacing on my pillow edge, sorry, I'm sure you thought I had disappeared. I was just having a little brain freeze, is I take a ruler and a ceramic pencil. This is a Dritz, which I think has been discontinued, but Bowen makes a wonderful one. And then I mark off 3/8 of an inch intervals all around the edge of the pillow. So I'm going to do that and then return to you. Okay, I have marks all down this side. They're probably very hard to see because I mark very lightly, but as long as you can see them, that's fine. And now I'm going to start working the loops. So I am going to take my needle down about 1/3 of this distance and come up at my mark. So the 3/8 is between the beginning point on each loop, and then I'll pull it through. You do kind of have to eyeball this and figure out how you place your needle to get your loops to look like loops. So here, I've actually not spaced that well. I'm going to pull this out and take my needle down again a few threads before where I inserted it. So I'm just gonna pull this out. And I'm also working with a very long length here because I'm a weirdo and I don't like to change my thread. I don't recommend it unless you can do it without snarling your thread. It's better to work with a shorter thread that you're not knotting than a longer length that you can't manage. If you are comfortable with a longer thread, it does mean fewer changes, but again, that's very much a personal thing. So I'm taking it down a little closer together. To make my loop, and now I will thread on 3 more. Take it down and then bring my needle back up at the mark. So I haven't done this in quite a while, and I'm still getting my eye in on placement of where I bring my needle down to make my loops. That actually looks okay to me. And then you can adjust the positioning of your beads a little bit as you tighten your thread. So just to repeat, 3 beads on your needle. Take it down in your fabric. You want to stay at the edge, but not necessarily on the seam. So I'm doing this just slightly inwards from my stitch line. And this is why I like a milliner's needle, because it's got a little flex to it, so you can wiggle it around and try and bring it up at the exact point that you've marked. So those are my loops, and basically I'm going to repeat this process all the way around the edge. So to measure for you here, these are just under 1/8 of an inch between where I have brought my needle up to start the loop and where I have taken it down to end it. So you can mark both points. I find it much easier just to have marks for the starting points, and then I eyeball where I take my needle down. It means that my loops aren't perfectly even, but it also means that the marks on the edge are much less confusing unless you want to work up and down into different lead colors. So I am going to go all the way around the pillow, and then I will come back to you. I have now finished all of the beaded loops around the perimeter of the pillow. So using 3 beads per 3/8 of an inch, I used a total of 168 2mm crystal rounds to finish Seasons of the Heart Spring. Again, I will put all of this information in the description below so that you can more easily reference it without having to watch the whole tutorial again. The only thing that remains now is to finish off my thread. So after finishing my last loop, I brought my thread up where I started my very first loop. I'm gonna tighten that up. So under the beads is a really good place to hide your tacking stitches, and that's how I'm going to finish this piece off. I'm going to take a very small tacking stitch, inserting the needle 1 linen thread over from where I brought it up, and then I am going to bring it up again underneath the opposite side of this loop. Take another tacking stitch. So I'm trying to remember to do this on camera, which is, in all honesty, a lot harder than it sounds. So I'm inserting my needle again right next to where I brought it up, but not back down through the same hole. You're trying to take a tacking stitch to secure your thread. And then, I would help if I could actually properly insert my needle. And then I'm going to bring it up again at the next loop, because these are really, the beads will then hide your tiny little tacking stitches as you secure your thread. Pull it through. I'm taking more tacking stitches to finish this off than I would do, say, to close up a pillow, because you want your beads to be very, sorry, trying to do this on camera, to be very securely attached. So tacking stitch up at the end of the loop, and then I'm going to take just one more tacking stitch, and then I think that's going to be good and secure. So I'm going to take a tacking stitch down next to where I brought my thread up, and then I'm going to angle my needle to the back and pull it through. And then I am going to clip my thread right at the surface of the fabric here, and just push that around so it disappears, and then you have a clean finished edge to your piece. A couple notes about the working of the beaded looped trim. Try and keep your up and down points on your loops straight on the weave. So this little loop right here is slightly skewed at an angle, so it doesn't sit quite the same as the other loops. If you have blocked your piece after finishing to square out your weave, it is going to make your job of beaded looped edging much easier, because you can just follow the linen threads to bring your needle up and down. Having said, also, if you have not blocked your pieces in the past and you're unfamiliar with blocking, you can find a tutorial for that under my Simple Harmony tutorials. It is number 8. So having said all of that, this is a wonderfully forgiving edging technique, because really what you see is the totality of the piece and not any variations in the individual loops. These aren't exact, they're a little unevenly spaced, because I was eyeballing where I would take my needle down to close the loop, and yet in the end what you see is really the sparkle of the beads, the beauty of the little loops, and the delicate edging that this adds to your piece. I hope that you will give beaded looped edging a try on your own pieces. Please tag me at KStrachan Embroidery on Instagram and share your finishes if you try this out, especially if you use other types and sizes of beads. I've really stuck with this wonderful 2mm crystals because I love the sparkle and the delicacy. But as Brenta's finish of Annie Morris showed, there's a lot that can be done with this technique. So I hope you'll try it out for yourself. I'll see you again on my next floss tube. And until then, happy stitching.